Salvador Sanchez was one of boxing's most gifted champions who dominated the featherweight division with a blend of speed and power never seen before. He went from becoming world champion at just 21 to defending his title against the greatest fighters of his era. However, in 1982, his life would end tragically at just 23 years old in a car accident. But a lot of things didn't add up, and to this day people still question what really happened that night. Salvador Sanchez was born in 1959 in Mexico. Emerged from a household bustling with life, he was one of 11 siblings in a family where every dinner table conversation had to be earned with raised voices and quick wit. But unlike many boxing origin stories, Sanchez's path wasn't paved with poverty. His father Felipe's successful construction company had given the family a comfortable middle-class life in Santiago Tianguistenco, a picturesque village where ancient traditions still whispered through cobblestone streets. Yet privilege doesn't shield you from life's first fights. Despite his comfortable upbringing, young Salvador found himself in an almost daily dance with neighborhood bullies who saw his small frame as an invitation. The schoolyard became his first ring, textbooks and pencils, his first stakes in combat. The other guys would look me over and see how little I was, Sanchez would later recall. They'd steal my books and pencils. I could take that, but when they began to call me in Spanish for little girl, I would have to show them that I had the tools. There were a lot of bloody noses and bloody eyes. Sometimes they were mine, but I found I liked to defend myself and hit others. These early confrontations revealed something crucial about Sanchez. It wasn't desperation that drew him to fighting, but a natural affinity for the art of combat. While other future champions fought for survival, Salvador fought for respect, turning each schoolyard scuffle into an impromptu lesson in the sweet science. At 14, Salvador Sanchez's path to becoming a doctor was forever altered when a friend's invitation to a local boxing gym awakened something primal within him. The sterile halls of medical school were replaced by the sweat-soaked canvas of a boxing ring, and young Salvador found his true calling. "Boxing gave me a lot of pleasure," Sanchez would reflect. "I was in my territory when I heard the bell ring to start a round. I felt my blood rushing. That rush, that feeling of absolute belonging, would shape every decision that followed." The battle for his future wasn't fought just in the ring. At home, his parents' dreams of a doctor in the family clashed with Salvador's growing obsession with boxing. But Sanchez, showing the same tactical mind that would later define his fighting style, presented them with simple logic. Why invest in medical school when his heart beat only for combat? It was a difficult conversation, but one that showed the same determination that would later make him champion. His amateur career blazed like a meteor. 14 fights, 14 victories, each one a masterclass in technical precision. But it was his professional debut in May 1975, at just 16 years old, that truly revealed his warrior spirit. When his opponent shattered his nose in the first round, many expected the teenage Sanchez to crumble. Instead, he did what would become his trademark. He adapted, overcame, and conquered, scoring a knockout in the third round. That broken nose became a badge of honor, a symbol of the price he was willing to pay for glory. Even then, there were whispers in Mexican boxing circles. This kid wasn't just another fighter, he was something special. Through 2 months of sparring and countless rounds of shadowboxing, Sanchez had transformed himself from a schoolboy dreaming of medical charts into a boxing prodigy who read his opponents like textbooks. His education hadn't stopped. It had simply shifted from anatomy books to the anatomy of fighting, from classroom lectures to lessons learned in blood and sweat. His first taste of defeat would come like a bitter pill, but it would reshape his entire legacy. After blazing through 18 straight victories, Sanchez faced Antonio Becerra for the Mexican bantam title in a fight that would haunt him for years. The split decision loss over 12 grueling rounds left more questions than answers, with Sanchez and many ringside observers convinced that boxing politics, not punches, had determined the outcome. But sometimes a loss isn't really a loss. It's a catalyst for transformation. That transformation would be tested sooner than expected. At the Olympic Auditorium in Los Angeles, Juan Escobar, a wild-swinging southpaw from Tijuana, brought Sanchez face-to-face with his limitations. The 5th-round knockdown was a wake-up call, and the near disaster in the 10th exposed gaps in his armor. When the fight was declared a draw, Sanchez did something rare in boxing. He admitted he should have lost. This humility, this brutal self-honesty, would become the foundation of his reinvention. Enter Enrique Huera, the maestro who would help orchestrate one of boxing's most remarkable transformations. Under Huera's guidance, Sanchez began to shed the typical Mexican brawling style like an old skin. In its place emerged something entirely new, a patient assassin who could think 3 punches ahead of his opponents. But Huera's influence went beyond technique. He helped Sanchez understand that true greatness requires both evolution and tradition. This philosophy manifested in a training regimen that bordered on the mythical. While other fighters stuck to conventional methods, Sanchez merged old and new with scientific precision. The crack of his axe against wood would echo through morning mist as he built raw power the old-fashioned way. Then he'd strap on a heart monitor, letting modern medicine guide his endless roadwork, 8 to 10 miles daily, pushing until his physician's instruments confirmed he had reached new levels of endurance. As he carved his way through the Mexico City and Texas circuits, each fight added another layer to his evolving style. Even appearing on the undercard of the Danny Lopez-Mike Ayala Featherweight Championship couldn't satisfy his hunger for greater challenges. The wins kept coming, leading him to a showdown with former amateur standout Richard Rosell at the Sports Arena in Los Angeles. Another step closer to the championship destiny that awaited him. Few could have predicted what was about to unfold that February night in 1980. Though Sanchez had climbed to the WBC's #1 ranking, he remained boxing's best-kept secret, a phantom champion in waiting who haunted Mexican rings but rarely crossed the border. But sometimes the unknown contender is the most dangerous of all. Danny Little Red Lopez was supposed to be too experienced, too battle-tested for this 21-year-old mystery from Mexico. Yet in the shadows of the promotion, veteran trainer Gil Clancy saw what others missed. Danny is 27 years old, and that's a very old featherweight, he warned, his weathered eyes seeing the future. One day he's going to get in that ring and find he just doesn't have it anymore. Those words would prove prophetic in ways even Clancy couldn't have imagined. What unfolded that night wasn't just a fight, it was an exhibition of boxing's highest art. Sanchez moved like smoke and struck like lightning, his combinations flowing with mathematical precision. Every punch had a purpose, every movement calculated to break down the champion piece by piece. Lopez, the battle-hardened warrior, found himself in a chess match when he'd prepared for a war. Round after round, Sanchez's mastery grew more apparent, until Lopez's corner had no choice but to save their fighter from further punishment. The $25,000 purse and 3-fight option with Don Giorgino's 5-star promotions were mere footnotes to what really happened that night. Salvador Sanchez hadn't just won a title, he'd announced himself to the boxing world as something entirely new, a technician with a warrior's heart, a patient assassin who could dismantle opponents with surgical precision. The Phantom had stepped into the light, and the featherweight division would never be the same. That night in Phoenix became boxing folklore, the moment when an underdog transformed into a legend, when a relatively unknown Mexican fighter showed that sometimes the most dangerous opponents are the ones you don't see coming. The boxing world had witnessed Sanchez's coming-out party, but they had no idea that this was just the beginning of a reign that would redefine what was possible in the featherweight division. A champion isn't truly tested until adversity strikes, and Ruben Castillo brought plenty of it. Just 2 months after claiming the crown, Sanchez found himself facing a puzzle that seemed unsolvable in the early rounds. Castillo moved like mercury, his combinations flowing with a rhythm that left the champion searching for answers. After 5 rounds, the scorecards told a story of potential upset, but Sanchez's face remained an enigma. No frustration, no concern, just the cold calculation of a predator waiting for the perfect moment. That moment began to unfold in the 6th round. Like a master composer introducing new instruments to a symphony, Sanchez started adding layers to his attack. By the 7th, his right hand had become the conductor's baton, orchestrating Castillo's movements with devastating precision. When the final scorecards were read, they revealed something remarkable. What appeared to be a close fight had been a masterclass in the judges' eyes, a unanimous decision that left observers stunned. "The judges beat me," Castillo would protest afterward. Sanchez didn't. I was in control from the first round to the last. But Sanchez's response revealed volumes about his fighting philosophy. I was hit several times, but never hard. I was never in trouble. In those words lay the essence of his style, the ability to make even successful attacks seem meaningless, to remain untouchable even while being touched. The rematch with Danny Little Red Lopez 2 months later wrote a different kind of story. This time, Sanchez entered as the favorite, the odds makers finally catching up to what insiders already knew. Lopez, determined to reclaim his throne, brought a better version of himself to the ring. For 9 rounds, he matched Sanchez's rhythm, showing why he had been champion. But boxing can be cruel to aging warriors, and by the 10th round, time began to collect its debt. The 14th round became a symphony of violence, Sanchez's combinations flowing with the precision of a surgeon and the power of the executioner. When Lopez's corner threw in the towel, it was almost an afterthought. Referee Mosain had already seen enough. The stoppage wasn't just the end of a fight, it was confirmation of a changing of the guard. Sanchez hadn't just defended his title, he had cemented his legacy as a different kind of champion, one who could adapt, overcome, and finish with devastating efficiency. Through these defenses, Sanchez was writing his own chapter in boxing's grand narrative. Each fight added new pages to the story of a champion who combined technical brilliance with relentless determination, creating a style that would influence generations of fighters to come. Standing across the ring that night was something Sanchez had never faced before. A 5'11" featherweight who moved like a lightweight and jabbed like a welterweight. Patrick Ford of Guyana, undefeated and unbowed, used his extraordinary reach to write puzzles that even Sanchez struggled to solve in the early rounds. But champions find a way, and by the 6th round, Sanchez had begun decoding Ford's style like a master cryptographer, breaking an impossible code. The 10th round marked the turning point, as Sanchez finally managed to pin his towering opponent against the ropes, transforming the boxing match into the kind of fight he preferred. When the final bell rang in the 15th, Ford was hanging on by pure will, his earlier elegance replaced by simple survival. The majority decision victory came with an unusual admission from the usually stoic champion. This had been his toughest test yet. In his dressing room, the mood was heavy with exhaustion rather than jubilation, the weight of victory feeling heavier than usual. But champions don't rest, and 3 months later, Sanchez was back in the ring, facing the power-punching Latte. Once again, Sanchez employed his trademark slow-burn strategy, starting cautiously before igniting his offense in the 6th round. As the fight progressed, he systematically dismantled Latte's resistance, targeting the challenger's eyes with surgical precision until swelling nearly sealed them shut. The unanimous decision was academic, but the message was clear. Sanchez was evolving into something special. By the time he steamrolled Spain's Roberto Castano in March 1981, stopping him in 10 dominant rounds, Sanchez had become more than just a champion. He was a national hero in Mexico. His purses reflected his rising status, climbing to $175,000 per defense. But the real prize lay ahead, a $900,000 payday for a collision course with Puerto Rican superstar Wilfredo Gómez that August. This wasn't just about money anymore. 4 successful title defenses, growing television exposure, and a style that combined technical brilliance with ruthless efficiency had transformed Sanchez from an unknown underdog into boxing royalty. Each fight added new layers to his legend, the patient stalker, the precise punisher, the champion who seemed to solve every puzzle placed before him. As the summer of 1981 approached, the boxing world held its breath for what promised to be his greatest test yet, a showdown that would pit Mexican pride against Puerto Rican power. Before the fight, the boxing world buzzed with Wilfredo Gómez's savage promises. This wasn't just pre-fight hype, it was personal. Each organ he listed became a target on a hitman's contract, as he declared he would strike Sanchez in the heart, liver, lungs, and pancreas. If the fight went beyond 10 rounds, Gómez promised, Sanchez would never fight again. The referee, he boasted, would only be needed to count to 10. For the first time, the public saw a different side of Sanchez. His response carried the kind of cold fury that makes veterans of the sport take notice. He suggested Gómez should have a pre-fight photo taken, just to remember what he used to look like. When Sanchez called him just another challenger, the steel in his voice told a different story. What unfolded that night in Las Vegas would become boxing legend. The opening bell had barely finished ringing when Sanchez shattered the script, detonating a combination that sent the mighty Gómez crashing to the canvas. The crowd erupted. This wasn't supposed to happen. Gómez, the fearsome puncher who had promised destruction, was the one tasting canvas. When he rose, his legs betrayed him, dancing an unsteady waltz that spelled trouble. But here was where Sanchez showed his true mastery. Where others might have rushed in for the kill, drunk on the possibility of a quick victory, he remained the chess player in a street fight. He began a systematic dismantling of his opponent that was almost beautiful in its brutality. Each punch was placed with scientific precision, each movement calculated to maximize damage while minimizing risk. As the rounds progressed, the fight transformed into a masterclass of technical boxing. Sanchez moved like smoke, his combinations flowing with liquid precision. Gómez, true to his warrior spirit, kept pressing forward, but he was walking into an avalanche. His eyes began to swell shut, turning each punch from Sanchez into a surprise he couldn't see coming. The 8th round wrote the final chapter. Sanchez's combinations, now thrown with both surgical precision and crushing power, began to land with devastating effect. Gómez, his face transformed by battle, refused to back down, but sometimes courage alone isn't enough. When the referee stepped in, he wasn't just stopping a fight, he was preventing what was becoming an execution. In the aftermath, Sanchez's analysis was characteristically understated. He had been prepared for Gómez's charging style, he explained, but once he landed that left hand, he knew victory was inevitable. It was classic Sanchez, analytical and absolutely correct. The hunter had become the hunted, the boastful predictions turned to dust in the Nevada desert. In their place stood a champion who had turned violence into art, transforming one of boxing's most anticipated showdowns into a showcase of technical brilliance. Success didn't change his soul, but it certainly changed his garage. With his new fortune, Sanchez created his own personal fleet of 8 cars, and his generosity flowed like water through his family. 7 brothers received cars, while his sisters found themselves showered with gifts. Yet beneath the trappings of success beat the heart of the same tactical warrior who had climbed from obscurity to greatness. When he stepped back into the ring against Britain's Pat Cowdell, just 4 months later, the champion's humility remained intact. While other fighters might have grown cocky with success, Sanchez spoke with characteristic restraint about his challenger's toughness. The ring, he suggested quietly, would be where any antagonizing would take place. The fight itself unfolded like a Sanchez signature piece, a slow-burning masterpiece that built toward inevitable destruction. Cowdell's awkward style and precise jab initially wrote riddles that even Sanchez struggled to solve. But like a master locksmith, Sanchez kept working at the combination until everything clicked in the 9th round. From there, the fight became a gradual demonstration of the gap between good and great. Then came those final 9 seconds of the 15th round, a moment that would be etched in boxing history. After 14.5 rounds of technical brilliance, Sanchez unleashed a right hand that seemed to carry all the power he'd been saving throughout his career. When Cowdell crashed to the canvas, it wasn't just another knockout, it was an exclamation point on Sanchez's greatness. By now, the boxing world had run out of superlatives for Sanchez. His manager, Cristobal Rosas, began drawing up plans for an even grander future, a campaign through the junior lightweight and lightweight divisions that would see Sanchez capture titles in 3 weight classes. The quiet technician from Santiago Tianguistenco had transformed into one of boxing's greatest practitioners. Yet even as his ambitions grew to encompass multiple weight divisions, Sanchez remained the same patient assassin who had first stepped into a gym at 14, a fighter who could turn violence into art and make destruction look like a science. Even greatness needs rest, and after the longest layoff of his career, 5 months that felt like an eternity in boxing time, Sanchez returned to HBO's lights for his 8th title defense against Rocky Garcia. While a unification bout with Eusebio Pedroza remained tangled in negotiation tape, and the dream match with Alexis Arguello lingered on the horizon, Garcia stood as the immediate challenge. The challenger brought more than anyone expected, turning what could have been a routine defense into a war of attrition. Garcia didn't just come to survive, he came to trade, standing toe-to-toe with one of boxing's most skilled practitioners. But skill and power, when wielded by a master like Sanchez, have a way of prevailing over raw courage. The champion methodically dismantled his brave opponent, adding another chapter to his growing legacy. But something had shifted in Sanchez's mindset. The fighter who had once lived only for the ring was now seeing a life beyond it. His words about retirement carried the weight of serious contemplation, not immediate, but with a clear endpoint in sight. The end of 1983 would mark his exit, he declared, but there was still work to be done. Money to earn, records to build, and perhaps most surprisingly, a return to his original dream. That dream of becoming a doctor, seemingly abandoned in those early days at the boxing gym, had never truly died. It had just been waiting, like a patient friend, for its moment to resurface. When Sanchez spoke of dedicating himself to medical studies after retirement, it revealed a dimension of the champion that few had considered. The tactical mind that had dissected opponents in the ring yearned for different kinds of challenges. The possibility of a super fight with Arguello sparked a different kind of calculation in Sanchez's mind. His analysis was characteristically precise. 135 pounds would be his limit. While Arguello chased glory at junior welterweight, Sanchez understood his own boundaries with the same clarity he brought to his fights. He knew exactly where his strength would hold and where it would fade, demonstrating the self-awareness that had helped make him great. These weren't just the usual boxing negotiations and retirement talks. They were the thoughts of a champion at his peak, already planning his exit while still having mountains to climb. The doctor's dream and the boxer's reality were beginning to merge, creating a vision of a future that extended far beyond the confines of the ring. Inside the hallowed halls of Madison Square Garden, destiny arranged a meeting between two legends, though only one was recognized as such at the time. While Sanchez arrived as the reigning champion, Azumah Nelson entered as an emergency replacement, a virtual unknown from Ghana with just 13 fights to his name. When writers mockingly dubbed him Half Nelson due to his 5'5" frame replacing the towering Miranda, they had no idea they were witnessing the arrival of the Terrible Terror, a fighter who would prove worthy of his more fearsome nickname. From the moment the first bell echoed through the garden, conventional wisdom evaporated in the heat of combat. Nelson didn't just come to challenge, he came to conquer. His combinations crashed against Sanchez's defense with frightening power, his awkward rhythm disrupting the champion's usually perfect timing. For the first time in years, observers saw something rare and revealing on Sanchez's face: concern. The stoic mask that had weathered so many storms began to crack under Nelson's relentless assault. Through 6 rounds, the unknown challenger forced boxing to rewrite its expectations. Nelson's raw power and unorthodox style weren't just testing Sanchez. They were pushing him to depths he hadn't explored since becoming champion. The Garden crowd, who had come to witness Sanchez's coronation in boxing's most famous arena, found themselves instead watching the birth of a new star. But the 7th round reminded everyone why Sanchez was considered great. Like a master composer introducing a devastating new theme, he unleashed 2 left hooks that sent Nelson crashing to the canvas. The moment crystallized the difference between talent and experience, between courage and craft. Yet Nelson, proving his terror wasn't just in his nickname, rose from the canvas with the kind of defiance that turns contenders into future champions. What followed was a chess match played with fists. Sanchez, drawing on years of championship experience, resisted the urge to rush his wounded prey. Instead, he began a systematic breakdown of his challenger, each punch placed with surgical precision. Nelson, despite being hurt, continued to fight back with the kind of heart that suggested this wouldn't be the last time boxing fans would hear his name. The Garden had seen its share of historic fights, but this one was writing a unique chapter. In one corner stood the established champion, forced to dig deeper than ever before. In the other, a replacement fighter was transforming himself from an emergency substitute into a legitimate contender, proving that sometimes the most dangerous opponents are the ones you don't see coming. In those championship rounds, Madison Square Garden witnessed the kind of battle that makes boxing transcend mere sport. Nelson and Sanchez traded leather with the kind of intensity that turns fighters into legends. Even as fatigue and punishment mounted, Nelson refused to yield, answering every combination from the champion with his own desperate fury. The garden crowd, who had come expecting a coronation, found themselves witnessing a war. When Nelson crashed to the canvas again in the final round, it wasn't just another knockdown, it was a testament to Sanchez's mastery and Nelson's indomitable spirit. Most fighters would have stayed down, their dreams of glory satisfied by having lasted this long with a great champion. But Nelson rose again, fighting until the final bell with the kind of courage that earns eternal respect in boxing's unforgiving realm. "Nelson is strong," Sanchez said after. "He had a lot of heart." The champion had faced many challenges, but few had forced him to reach so deeply into his reservoir of skill and determination. What began as a replacement fight had transformed into something far more significant, a clash that would be remembered not just for its winner, but for the emergence of another future great. In the darkness of an early August morning, boxing lost one of its brightest stars. Just 3 weeks after his epic battle with Nelson, Salvador Sanchez's life ended on a stretch of highway north of Mexico City. The details of that fatal moment would be debated. Initial reports of a failed overtaking attempt later gave way to a more complex scenario involving 2 cargo trucks, with Sanchez's Porsche caught in a deadly sequence of collisions. The truth of those final seconds mattered less than the devastating finality of the loss. At just 23 years old, Sanchez had already carved out a legacy that most fighters spend entire careers trying to achieve. The man who dreamed of becoming a doctor, who turned neighborhood scuffles into championship glory, who combined old-school grit with modern technical brilliance, was gone in an instant. When Ring magazine publisher Bert Sugar spoke of boxing's few true ambassadors, he captured what made Sanchez special. This wasn't just a champion who could fight, this was a fighter who elevated the sport both inside and outside the ring. The scheduled rematch with Juan Laporte would never happen. The dream of becoming a 3-division champion would remain just that, a dream. The medical studies that awaited after retirement would never begin. Instead, boxing was left to wonder what might have been. At 23, with 9 successful title defenses and a perfect blend of skill and power, Sanchez seemed destined to rewrite the sport's record books. In boxing, some mysteries endure longer than the fights themselves. On that final day in Guanajuato, Sanchez's story took an unexpected turn that would spawn decades of questions. The champion was in his gym, going through the familiar rhythms of training, when a phone call shattered his usual composure. Those who witnessed the moment saw something rare, nervousness crossing the face of a man known for his unshakable calm. What followed defied his methodical nature. The careful strategist, who never rushed in the ring, suddenly abandoned his routine, leaving without a word to his manager, Cristobal Rosas. The man who had built his career on patience and precision was now racing toward Querétaro in his Porsche, a $330,000 gift from a grateful gambler who had struck it rich betting on Sanchez's victory over Nelson. The final chapter of Sanchez's life remained unfinished, the phone call's contents forever lost to time. When Rosas was called to identify the body, even he couldn't immediately accept the truth. The remains were so severely damaged that the manager who knew Sanchez best initially refused to believe it was him. The tactical genius who had seemed untouchable in the ring had proven all too mortal on that dark stretch of highway. Behind the champion stood a young family, Maria Teresa, just 21 years old, left to raise their sons alone. Christian Salvador, barely past his first birthday at 16 months, and Omar, still an infant at 4 months, would grow up knowing their father only through stories and fight films. Maria Teresa's decision never to remarry spoke to a love that survived beyond the ring's final bell, beyond that mysterious phone call, beyond the twisted metal of an August morning. The questions lingered like smoke after a knockout. What was in that call? Why the urgent journey? Why leave without a word to his trusted manager? But perhaps these mysteries only added to the legend of Salvador Sanchez, a champion who lived with precision but left us with questions that would never be answered. In death, as in life, he remained a figure who left the boxing world wanting more, wondering what might have been. Nations have many heroes, but few capture the soul of a country like Salvador Sanchez captured Mexico's. When news of his death spread, it wasn't just the boxing community that mourned. It was an entire nation that felt the loss in its bones. The funeral, broadcast across Mexico, became a moment of collective grief. Millions of viewers united in their sorrow for a champion who had represented the best of what they could be. Inside the boxing world, his death created a void that felt impossible to fill. This wasn't just the loss of a champion, it was the extinguishing of possibility itself. At 23, Sanchez had already mastered skills that veterans twice his age struggled to grasp. His combination of technical brilliance and raw power, of patience and precision, suggested heights of achievement that boxing would never get to witness. The metaphor of the meteor captured something essential about Sanchez's journey: brilliant, breathtaking, and gone too soon. But meteors leave only darkness in their wake, while Sanchez left something more enduring. He left a template for what a champion could be: humble in victory, dignified in conduct, relentless in pursuit of excellence. He showed that true greatness doesn't require boasting, that skill can speak louder than words, that a warrior's heart can beat within a gentleman's chest. Check out our documentary on Trevor Berbick and how he ended Muhammad Ali's career. Like and subscribe for 100 years of luck. Until next time.